Tonight, on Bedtime Myths and Mysteries, there is a town in France that history almost forgot. A quiet place now, with narrow streets and old stone walls that catch the afternoon light in a way that feels, somehow, like an apology. It is called Loudun, and if you walked through it today, you might stop at a certain square, look at the unremarkable ground beneath your feet, and feel nothing at all. No shiver, no pull, no echo of what was done there. But something was done there, and whether it was divine or diabolical, or something far more human and far more frightening, that is a question the town has never quite answered. The year was 1632. In those days, Loudun was a place of some importance, a walled town in the Vienne region, home to both Catholics and Protestants living in an uneasy quiet that passed for peace. It had a castle, a market, a Ursuline convent on the edge of town where a small community of nuns lived behind closed doors in an order of silence and routine. Their prioress was a woman named Jeanne. She was 33 years old, small, intelligent, and by her own later account, deeply restless beneath the discipline of convent life. She had entered the religious order not entirely by choice, a common enough story for women of modest noble birth in 17th century France, and she had risen to lead her sisters through a combination of sharp instinct and force of will. Those who knew her described her as compelling, difficult to look away from, the kind of person whose silences say more than other people's words. The trouble, as the records tell it, began slowly, the way trouble often does. A new priest had come to Loudun. His name was Urbain Grandier, a man of considerable learning, considerable vanity, and if his enemies were to be believed, considerable sin. He was handsome in the way that creates problems. He'd already made enemies among the town's clergy for reasons that blended theology with wounded pride, and rumor had followed him like a shadow through every parish he had served. He had never set foot inside the Ursuline convent. He had never spoken to Jeanne, and yet, somehow, his name found its way there. It began with dreams. Sister after sister reported the same thing. Figures at the edge of sleep, voices that couldn't be placed, a feeling upon waking that something had entered the room and had not yet left. Jeanne reported the worst of it. She described a presence that came at night, that pressed against the boundary between sleep and waking, that wore a face she recognized but refused, for a time, to name aloud. The convent's confessor was dismissed. A new one was appointed, then another, and then the episodes began in earnest. What the church examiners witnessed over the following months, and they witnessed a great deal, because this was not a private matter. Loudun attracted priests, physicians, magistrates, and eventually crowds. It was difficult to categorize. The nuns convulsed. They spoke in voices that were not their own. They named demons. They accused the absent Grandier of sending those demons into them through witchcraft, through pacts, through the air itself. They contorted in ways that the physicians present noted with a particular, careful discomfort, as though their bodies had forgotten their own limits. The records of the exorcisms survive. They are long documents, formal, precise, and deeply strange. They name the demons by name, Asmodeus, Leviathan, Issacharen, and others, and they record the responses given during the rites, the questions asked by the exorcists, the answers that came back in fractured Latin, in voices the witnesses swore were not human. Several of those witnesses were not credulous men. Several were physicians who had come expecting fraud and left writing in their private letters that they did not know what they had seen. Grandier was arrested in 1633. He maintained his innocence to the end. He was tortured, as was required by law, and did not confess. He was convicted regardless. In August of that year, He was burned alive in the square at Loudun. His composure at the execution disturbed people. He was calm. He did not rage. He prayed quietly, and he died. And those who had arranged his death were perhaps expecting something more, some final evidence of guilt, some crack in the facade. And when it didn't come, the silence around it was uncomfortable. The possessions did not stop after his death. That detail appears in the records almost as an aside, a footnote, as if no one quite wanted to dwell on what it might mean. Jeanne des Anges continued to be exorcised for years. Her case became, in some ways, a public spectacle. She traveled with her exorcists. She was presented at court. She met the cardinal. On her hand, she later claimed, a miraculous inscription appeared in the skin, the names of holy figures, written there by angels as proof of her eventual deliverance. She wrote a memoir. She lived to old age. In her memoir, she is candid about things you might not expect. She wrote about her pride, her longing, the darkness she had carried into the convent long before any demon was named. She wrote about Grandier with a complexity that her later official accounts had smoothed away. His image had occupied her thoughts before the dreams began, the way the affliction had felt in some moments, like a kind of terrible intimacy. Modern historians have returned to Loudun many times, with different frameworks, different questions. Some have written about mass hysteria, the way fear and repression and the closed world of the convent could produce exactly what was documented. Some have written about politics, the powerful men who wanted Grandier gone and found in the nuns a convenient instrument. Some have noted that ergot, a fungus that grows on rye and causes vivid hallucinations, was common in the region in that period. Some have returned quietly to the theological record and found that the exorcists themselves, men who went into that convent as skeptics, came out changed. None of these explanations are entirely wrong. None of them are entirely satisfying. What lingers when you read the documents long enough is not the convulsions or the voices or the names of the demons. What lingers is something smaller. It is the moment in Jeanne's memoir where she writes that during one of the worst episodes, when the thing inside her was raging and the exorcist was praying and the room was full of frightened witnesses, she became suddenly, briefly, very still. And in that stillness, she writes, she looked at herself from somewhere above, and she could not tell, she genuinely could not tell, which parts of what she was doing were not her own. That question never quite left her. You can feel it in the way she writes. The town of Loudun still stands. The convent is long gone, but the square remains. People walk across it on their way to somewhere else. They buy bread. They stop to check their phones. The stones say nothing. But somewhere in the archives of a church in Angers, Jeanne des Anges' hand, preserved and documented, still carries, if the records are to be believed, the trace of something written there. By what and why, and whether it means anything at all, no one has ever fully agreed. And if you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to subscribe to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries for more stories that blur the line between truth and legend.